Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Godot community. I am Jody Ann Henry, and I am the PLC moderator for Middle School Theater. I am so excited that you have decided to join us for another webinar. Please feel free to engage in discussion at the end of this webinar, ask any questions, share any ideas that you may have regarding the topic. For today's webinar, I will be sharing with you some of my digital teaching experiences, some projects that I've worked on with my students, as well as ways that I assess their work. I will talk about some of my wins and some of my struggles. There are absolutely some challenges that I face with transitioning to virtual learning, but there are definitely some positive things that I feel that have enhanced my teaching experience as well as my students' learning experience. But first, what exactly does my schedule look like? Now, for the fall semester, we had a shorter day. Classes started at 9:45 and ended at 1:50, and we only had 30 minutes of synchronous time online with the students and 15 minutes asynchronous time at the end of the class. Then the students had 10 minutes to transition to their next class. We would then give them assignments that they would complete on their own outside of this 9:45 to 1:50 window. Now, spring semester, we are on a longer schedule. We are back to our usual classes start 8:10 in the morning and we end at 3:10 p.m. The students have 4 classes a day and each class is 80 minutes of synchronous time, learning time. So it's the usual direct instruction, students working on their own and closing at the end of the school day. I am transitioning to a hybrid learning classroom where students will have the option of remaining virtual, but they have the option of returning back to school. So we're transitioning. I'm really excited to see what that may look like. I shared with you all in the first video how I set up my classroom preparing for students to return. So I'm excited to see exactly how that will be with having students in the room as well as online. Now, here are just some of the courses that I've been teaching for the fall and spring semester. So for the fall semester, I taught Fundamentals of Theater 2 and 3 combined in the same class period. Then I had 2 sessions of Fundamentals of Theater 1. Spring semester, I am teaching Fundamentals of Theater 2 and 3, but they're both in different class periods, as well as Fundamentals of Theater 1. Now, a lot of my students in the intro class, they have never taken theater before, so it is their first class, and I'm having to really start from the basic and give them that foundation. And when I say no introduction to theater, a lot of them have never seen a play, never been to a play, never been a part of a performance. So they're coming in with very little experience. Then the Fundamentals of Theater 2 and 3 class are more performance based and they get more performance opportunities in those classes. Now for my personal experience and some wins and some struggles that I have been experiencing with virtual learning, I would say some of my wins would be an improvement in attendance. From the end of last semester, when we transitioned to virtual learning, I found that a lot of students weren't logging in, they weren't completing it on their assignments, they weren't attending the online sessions. But I am finding now in the fall semester and even more so in the spring, I find an increase in the number of students who are actually logging into class, attending and participating. That for me is exciting because it's the closest that I'm coming to having all the students in the classroom and being more hands-on. I mean, the students have the option, they're home, so they really can choose to log in and not log in, and it is really out of my control. So seeing them voluntarily and consistently logging and attending class is really exciting to see. Also, students' performance assignments. I'm finding that there's an increase in the number of submissions in the performance assignments in comparison to the end of last school year. I personally use Flipgrid, so I have students record themselves and submit their videos on Flipgrid. And the end of last semester, I would say only a handful of students were turning in submitting their videos at a time, but I'm finding that there's certainly an increase in that. So for me, it's exciting because I hated giving the assignments and we talk about these different elements of performance and then wanting them to apply the knowledge to create some type of performance and not being able to see that. It was difficult to assess their understanding as well as their ability to apply what they learned. Also, I'm finding it really exciting to use more technology in the class. I was nervous about relying on students recording themselves and submitting those assignments versus being able to perform in the space, give the live feedback, have them redo it and make those adjustments. But I'm giving them more digital projects, and I think they're having a lot of fun with editing and having the ability to redo and submit their best versions. I've also been creative in creating more digital projects for the students and also being more open to the types of things that they're interested in. For example, YouTube and TikTok, using those things as inspiration for some of the digital projects that I'm assigning in the class. Still, the focus is on performance and them using those performance skills. Also, I'm able to just utilize the internet more with research and allowing them to do more independent projects. I'm finding new programs and apps that I can use, and that's more exciting. As well as duet acting scenes. I was really nervous about how are these students going to be working on scenes. I'm going to have to do a lot of solo performances because they're in different locations, but I'm finding that the students are being very creative in terms of blocking and moving and editing and being able to use different backgrounds and green screens. They're being creative, and I'm learning more about those things as well as they're learning, and we're also teaching each other. So I'm really excited about those things. Another thing that I would definitely count as a win, I'm noticing that students who are usually shy, whenever it was time to perform or present in front of the class, they were always a bit more reserved, a lot more self-conscious and nervous. But I'm realizing that some of those students are more willing to take risk now that they're able to record themselves and probably just being in the comfort of their home. For example, I had one particular student who barely spoke. Barely spoke. I would always try to keep him engaged, ask questions, even at the beginning of class, and he sometimes would just stare. Even at times when he did get up to present, we could barely hear him. And I'm so surprised that I have him for Fundamentals of Theater 2 this semester. And I'm realizing how funny he is. He's really blossoming at improv. He turns on his camera and he's participating. And I'm like, is this the same student that I had last semester? So I'm having more instances where some students are just more comfortable behind the computer, behind the camera, than they would be actually getting up in front of people. And it's exciting to see their growth in that way. Now, of course, there are definitely a lot of struggles that we are all experiencing as we adjust to this new mode of teaching. And I would say my biggest struggle has been student engagement. I am constantly trying to find different engagement strategies that work in my classroom to keep the students engaged and participating in discussion and still keeping the class as hands-on as possible. So that is a constant struggle. Also, not being able to see the students is also difficult. I'm not able to see their facial expressions and their reactions and read body language and know when they're with me and they're understanding and when they're not. A lot of students do not turn their cameras on, so I'm not able to read the room and make those in the moment adjustments. Sometimes I am not aware if students are actually in class, if they've just logged in. So that can also be a challenge. Also, creating the same type of classroom culture and environment, that sense of ensemble and we're together and teamwork and hands-on, it's difficult maintaining that virtually. Now, I have definitely found ways that the students are able to collaborate and still create that sense of ensemble, but it's a struggle, and I'm constantly making those adjustments to maintain that classroom culture. Another struggle is building relationships with new students. So the students who are just coming into Fundamentals of Theater 1, not knowing them, they don't know me, still trying to build that rapport and get to know them one-on-one. It's a challenge that I'm making a conscious effort to work on, that they're not just all logging into Zoom and listening to me and then working in break rooms. I am making a conscious effort to really get to know the students, because I do believe that once they're comfortable with me, they'll be more willing to take risk and perform, turn their cameras on, and engage in class. I won't have to necessarily force them to do that. Also, lack of student submissions. There's certainly an improvement in this, but I found it challenging at the end of last school year and the beginning of this school year that students weren't submitting assignments on time or at all. So in my classroom, when we're actually in the room, we would do a lot of our projects in class. There wasn't a lot of assignments that they would work on outside of class. So I would use the hour and a half class time for them to complete projects and then submit them. So I was able to monitor their progress, assist students that needed help. I was able to work with students one-on-one in small groups to complete the assignments. Now that last semester, they were spending a lot of time asynchronously, it was difficult for me to really monitor and ensure that students were submitting all the assignments on time. Now that we are back to an 80-minute time slot, I'm better able to do that because they are completing a lot of those assignments in class. I personally utilized Google Docs or Microsoft Word, where they're able to share the document with me, so I'm able to see what they're doing and give feedback in the moment on those written assignments, or I'm able to put them into breakout rooms and really work with them one-on-one and to ensure that they're completing the assignment. So I'm certainly finding ways, but at the end of last year and the beginning of the fall semester this year, that was a challenge because we were only at a 30-minute synchronous class time. That was not enough time for students to be introduced to the material, to work on the actual product, and get feedback within that 30 minutes. So I am certainly finding ways to overcome some of these challenges, and I think we all are. It's one of those things where it's a learning experience. You learn as you go. But there are certainly a lot of benefits and great things that can happen in a virtual classroom. Now for some virtual learning projects that I've done with my students that have been very successful, that they enjoy, that I've been able to adjust to our virtual learning classroom, and the students did quite well with these particular projects. Now here are just a few. Mock YouTube intro videos. I had them create solo pantomime performances. They've done a cereal box proscenium stage project. They've created radio plays. They've done duet acting scenes, script writing, and monologues. The mock YouTube intro video was actually an idea that I got from another friend of mine who's also a teacher. She had her students do this project at the beginning of the school year or semester to introduce themselves, and I thought this was such a great idea. Instead of having the students just learn about each other through the games, I think it would be really interesting for them to record themselves and to be creative with this particular assignment. So I gave them a list of 6 questions that they had to answer in their video, but I also allowed them to have the creative liberty to add music, to add pictures, add videos to their intro video. So I started them off with the concept that they were going to create a YouTube channel, and this was their first video for their viewers to learn about them and what their channel was going to be about. Some of my students did a Q&A video. Some of them made it more of a vlog that we got to see a slice of their life, a day in the life of. So they were really creative, but in essence, I just wanted them to share the response to those 6 questions. I think they had a lot of fun with it. Here is a still picture of one of the videos from one of my students for this particular project. Another project that we did in class was a solo pantomime. So I gave them a list of scenarios that they had to pick from. They wrote, created the pantomime, and then recorded themselves. And I allowed them to use music to help to set the mood and the tone of their pantomime. And I got some really great submissions. We also did a cereal box proscenium stage project. Here are 2 pictures from 2 of my students' submissions. So we used a cereal box or a shoe box, whatever they had. In fact, some students used cardboard, 2 pieces of cardboard, and glue them together for this to be the back of the stage, and this is the stage floor. So students were creative if they did not have a cereal box or a shoe box, but essentially they had to identify, or their box, their stage had to have the grand drape, they had to have the apron, they had to identify the 9 areas of the stage, the wings. You're not able to see it in this particular picture, but the wings, the backdrop. The next project that we worked on was the radio play. I think the students had a lot of fun with this particular assignment. So this came at the end of my voice unit. So we spoke about articulation, we spoke about vocal quality and vocal variety, projection, inflection. We talked a lot about those things, and we talked about ways in which an actor uses their voice to communicate the story, to tell us the character's emotions, their thoughts, their feelings. So at the end of that unit, they wrote a radio drama, and then they recorded themselves reading the script, and they included music and sound effects as a part of their performance. For this semester, I am making an adjustment with this particular project. I didn't want my students to focus so much on the writing of the script. So for this semester, I chose to give them short radio scripts, and in fact, they're working in small groups. Now, each group has 2 individuals, but there are at least 4 different characters in the script. And I did this because I wanted them to get used to adjusting their voice to play more than one character. So what type of vocal quality does this character have versus this one, and what are some things I can adjust? So I spoke extensively about changing the inflection. Some characters also speak at a higher pitch. Some characters have a slower rate in terms of their speech. some people speak much more softer and we can't really hear them, and some people are loud. So, reading a script, what did you learn about this character? How would this person sound? And how would you, as an actor, make those adjustments vocally to fit the character? So, I adjusted, it's the same project, but I've changed the way in which the students are going to be doing it and what the end product is going to be like. Also, they've done a lot of duet acting scenes. For my intro students, they've done two. So I did open scenes with them, and I've also done scripted scenes, duet scripted scenes that they're going to do at the end of the semester. But as I mentioned in my wins, this particular project, I was really nervous about them working on, but they came out really nicely. I thought a lot of the students were going to feel the need to really just sit at the computer, but they found interesting ways to still move around and include blocking in their script while performing on Zoom. Also, I still do script writing, so I put them in break rooms because I personally were utilizing Zoom. So I have that ability to put them into breakout rooms where they can communicate in small groups. I use Microsoft Word or Google Docs where they're able to share the document with each other. So they're able to edit the scripts and share ideas. They can communicate in the chat and work together to write their short plays or short scenes, as well as we do some monologue work. And these are just a few of the different projects that I've adapted to virtual learning. Now, here is an example of one of my students' submission for the radio drama project. They had to write scripts that has two characters, two very distinct characters. They had to be deliberate in terms of the way the character spoke, their attitude, their tone, the way they respond to whatever conflict in the script. So I wanted to make sure, because they had to read both parts, I wanted them to make sure that the characters were very different from each other, which would have made it easier for them to make that distinction in their delivery.
Good morning, Atlanta. You're listening to Channel 2003. You're in for quite the treat. A bump in the day starring Charles Jones is coming your way. It's such a beautiful day outside today, isn't it, Bowie?
No, it's not, Chris. No, it's not.
Come on, we've been stuck in this house for like a week. I want to go out and do something. Let's go to the mall.
We are in the middle of a global pandemic, and you want to go to the mall.
Okay, yes. That might be a bad idea. But how about a walk or something?
How about no?
Well, I just don't know what to do anymore because I feel like we've been sitting in this house for like an entire week and I just want to get out of the house. I just don't know what to do anymore.
Chris, will you please sit down? Your pacing is giving me a headache.
Okay, fine. Let's just see what's on TV or something.
I'm down for that, I guess.
What about a Disney movie?
I would rather gouge my eyes out with a spork from Burger King than watch a Disney movie.
You know what? I just can't even believe the fact that you and I are identical twins. We're nothing alike. I'm so sick of your constant negativity.
And I'm so tired of your constant existence.
Why you... What was that?
Wait, 'cause I heard that too.
So that was the same student playing both voices. They were playing both characters. And as you may notice that each character had a very distinct personality. He made a different choice in terms of one character spoke really fast, had a higher pitched voice. The other character spoke more slowly, had a lower pitch in their voice. They were also a bit more lethargic and not as energetic as the other. Now, I will share with you ways that I evaluate my students' performance and written work and reflections during virtual learning, and I will speak specifically about how I assess that particular performance that you just watched. So there are different ways in which I do formative assessments to check to see what my students are learning, what they actually know, and what I need to reteach. Some examples are I utilize the chat feature. So at the end of every lesson, I may pose 3 important questions from the lesson that covers the information I need them to know, and they respond to those questions privately in the chat. So I'm able to see each student's response as they come in, and I'm able to see, did they really understand, did they not understand. At times, I may create a quiz where I will send them the link. They're able to respond to the questions, and it creates a spreadsheet at the end where I can see student score. I can see what questions they miss. Sometimes I utilize the free version of Kahoot, so I'll post my quizzes on Kahoot as a game. They think it's really exciting and really fun. And at the end of the Kahoot game, it gives me a spreadsheet of the students' scores. It breaks down the questions that they had difficulty with, and I'm able to use that data to inform my next lesson or what we do in class later. Those are some examples of ways I assess students in the moment to see what they're learning and use that data to inform future lessons. Now, for performance assignments, I use a rubric that has a list of criterias, and then I'm able to score the students on each of those criterias from 1 to 5, or from poor, good to excellent. I sometimes use checklists. So it has a list of items that they need to include for this project, and I score them based on having those lists of things. Now here's an example of the rubric that I use for the script portion of their radio drama project. So this has a list of things that they need to include in their script, and I score them from 1 to 5, how effective they've done that. So the first thing I'm looking for is how well defined the character's personality and voice is. So as I mentioned previously, we talked extensively about the difference in pitch and volume and rate and inflection from one character to the next. We talked about each person has a distinct vocal quality. And we also talked about ways in which the playwright makes that evident in the script and what clues that we are looking for as an actor to decipher that as we're reading. We're looking at things like the length of the sentences. We're looking at punctuation. We look at the vocabulary words. When they're writing their scripts, they're looking at making those distinct choices in the dialogue, in the words of the character to make that evident. I also talk about use of sound effects to tell the story, making note of different sound effects and how that can be used to enhance the story because we're not relying on the visual. Also, using music to set the mood and the tone. So we spoke about how we can use music to set the mood. We can use music to create tension. We can use music to create suspense. We can use more playful, lighter music to create a happier, cheerier mood. What is the mood? What is the tone of your play? And what type of music you might use at the beginning or throughout. I also have them do an intro, very similar to a slate. They need to state their name and the title of the show. I also score them on them following the format of the script. So I give them a template of exactly how they need to format the script, and did they follow that or not. I also grade them on the storyline. Did it have a clear beginning, middle, and an end? And they needed to have at least 2 pages. Their script needed to be at least 2 pages. And this ties into our playwriting standard. So this project, I love it because not only does it target the performance aspect, I'm also able to reiterate some of those playwriting skills that they learn. And I'm able to teach both standards and tie both of them at the same time. Now, this is the rubric that I use to assess the performance portion of the project. So the standard that I'm assessing with this particular part of the assignment is I'm assessing how effective they're able to apply their verbal and nonverbal skills in a performance. Rate, pitch, volume, inflection, how are they utilizing those things in a performance to not just communicate the story, but also to express the character. I'm also evaluating their projection. Can I hear you? Are you projecting well? I'm also evaluating their voice expression. So, are they using good expression to communicate the emotion of the character, to communicate the character's personality? And when I talk about voice expression, I'm really talking about their use of pitch and inflection in their voice. I'm assessing rate. Are they making conscious effort between the pacing in which they use to deliver the lines, and how does that affect the story? I choose to use very student-friendly vocabulary in this particular rubric because the students also use this rubric to assess their peers' performance as well as assess their own. So I encourage them to use this rubric to assess their work before submitting it, and then we're able to really talk about that. I use this rubric when I'm identifying areas of excellence as well as areas that need improvement. Now, this is the end of our webinar. If you have any questions, any comments, any ideas, I would love for you to share those with me. Feel free to reach out using the Godot Community Middle School Theater Discussion Board to post any of those questions, comments, or ideas that you have. I would love to know, what are you doing in your classroom? What is working for you? What struggles or challenges that you're facing in your classroom? And what are some things that you might be doing to overcome those challenges? I really hope that the information in this video was helpful for you. Again, please feel free to reach out and communicate. I'd love to engage in conversation and discussion with you. Also, don't forget to follow us on Facebook. We are on Twitter. So please reach out, stay connected. Again, thank you for tuning in. Bye.